The Bitcoin Group, the American original. For over the last 10 seconds, the sharpest Satoshis, the best Bitcoins, the hardest cryptocurrency talk. We'd like to welcome our panelists, Dan Eve, the Crypto Raptor.
Reporting live from rainy UK.
Ben Ark from LN Bits.
Reporting live from Edinburgh.
And I'm Thomas Hunt from the World Crypto Network. Moving on to issue 1. Customers battle to regain billions in Bitcoin the DOJ recovered after its largest seizure of stolen crypto. Yes, that's right. Bitfinex is back in the news again, and this time the feds found the money. The people now want their money back, but of course, as you all recall, they were provided Bitfinex debt tokens, many of them selling at 20%, 20 cents on the dollar for their troubles. They were never given an option to just wait and see if the Bitcoin was recovered. They were never even thought of giving their value in Bitcoin. They were immediately given their value in fiat debt tokens, and now they want their money back. Dan Eve, what do you think about the Bitfinex hack, the fascinating debt token story that will no doubt be studied in business schools till the end of time, and now, of course, the fascinating turn of story where the feds found the money? Who should get the money?
Well, I think ultimately it has to go to the users who lost their money. But you've got to give it to Bitfinex for at least trying. I know that they created a shitcoin token but at least they tried to give some value back to the customers. But ultimately, how could you say no to returning money that was stolen from your platform because someone hacked it or got their hands on it in some way, which is down to your own security issues. So. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out in court, because ultimately people didn't have a choice with this token. If they didn't hit it at the right time, I think one of the reports was like, in fact, one of the guys said he sold it as soon as possible and only got 25% of the value of the token. So the argument that Bitfinex is saying that you could have sold our shitcoin representative token straight away and then bought Bitcoin with it, and you would have been happy days. But ultimately, they didn't get a choice in the matter. Whilst it kind of seemed like a good thing at the time that they got some value back, now that they know that that value was taken away when Bitcoin was $1,000 and it's floating around 20 now, that's a huge loss and a life-changing amount of money if they can get that back today. And there's not really been much reports of the crocodile of Wall Street and a hubby and whether they're actually going to be prosecuted yet, right? There still seems like it's still really, or how successful that prosecution is going to be, because they're only going to be done for money laundering and not the original theft. So I'd like to see who stole the money in the first place and how it ended up with them, because the whole thing's a crazy story in itself, right? Who would give a couple of people billions of dollars worth of Bitcoin to basically hold on to, right? Who puts that trust in someone? And even when it was stolen, it would still been, in the tens, hundreds of millions, right? So it seems a bit far-fetched that they were just looking after the money, but if they can't prove that they stole it, it's a crazy story.
Their initial plan was to launder the money through Walmart. I think they bought some PlayStation 5s or something, somehow got tracked. And it just doesn't seem like you could launder billions of dollars through gift cards, maybe a few thousand.
It's a lot of PlayStations.
Welcome to Josh Shigala. Welcome to the show. Josh, why are these customers complaining? After all, as Dan said, they got their shitcoin token. What more do they want?
Yeah, it's super interesting. I actually like how Bitfinex handled it. I thought it was interesting. I don't like or dislike it. What I find is interesting. I find it interesting, like the Mt. Gox collapse, which I suffered through, has didn't have that option, and then they found like 200,000 Bitcoin underneath the mattress somewhere, and said, "Oh, look, we came across some, and we can pay this much back." But I kind of found it interesting that Bitfinex went, okay, we'll tokenize this. And the thing was that they played it kind of really well, where everyone got the token, then the price tanked like crazy, and then they bought all their debt back at a tanked price, which was also like a total baller move on their part.
It's the
I don't
greatest
see
thing
how
that's
any of
ever
this is
happened in
legal.
business. Like, I think it's going to be studied in business schools forever. But I agree, Josh. I don't think it's legal.
No, I don't see how any of it's legal. Like, oh, buy it here. I know you had money, but we'll give you this coin, and then we'll buy it back off you for half the price. And now, well, yeah. So it's very, very interesting to see what happens now. Yeah, it's an ongoing saga.
Well, and remember the first rule of hacking: the company can never prove that they didn't hack themselves. It's always the most likely option, an inside job of some kind. Ben Ark, what do you think? They got Walmart gift cards. The other people got shitcoin tokens. Who should the feds give the money to, the company or the people?
I think what's interesting is by Bitfinex issuing this BFX token, and by their users just kind of, it's like a compromise, you know, classic compromise where everyone's not satisfied. But they've kicked this can down the road, and now that the coins have reappeared, people have like a real vested interest to take Bitfinex to court and say, you know, these are our coins. There was a quote in the article which said, this was my property and these coins were my property. I had X amount of Bitcoin on there. And of course, you know, not your keys, not your Bitcoin. It's a very good lesson in that. But the users certainly have a good argument. And before, when the coins had just disappeared, there was kind of no point like taking Bitfinex to court. It's like, okay, we'll put up with this BFX token. It's going to be worth a fraction of the actual Bitcoin I had on the exchange at the time, but at least you can continue to operate and it's better than the empty GOX, blah, blah, blah. But I think it's going to open a can of worms, because now the legality of the issuance of that debt token is going to come under scrutiny, and will be tried and tested in the court of law, I imagine, because there's people have, I think there's someone in the article, I think they had like 91 Bitcoins on there. I know people who lost a lot of money on Bitfinex. And it's like Dan said as well, like when they got this coin, it's supposed to be pegged to the dollar, but because they just issued them and then people dumped them, they ended up dropping to 25%. And then they could then sell those coins later on for like actual collateral in Bitfinex's company or something. But I don't think they were ever made whole through their tokenry. And now the coins are available theoretically if they can get them. I mean, this was also in the article. It's like, well, who ends up with the coins? Is it the criminal investigation who actually, you know, get the coins from the hackers, or is it Bitfinex who are going to get the coins? They're going to get the Bitcoins, or will it be the users who get the Bitcoins? And everyone's going to be fighting for, you know, they're all incentivized to fight for their case. But I think the users do have a good solid case, and I think by them having a good solid case, it will bring Bitfinex under a lot of scrutiny for the debt token in which they issued, which, like you say, I'm not sure is entirely legal.
Exit question, forced prediction. Who gets the money and do they keep it? Dan Eve.
I reckon it's going to be, they've got a rule in favor of the users. I mean, the token situation is already, the tokenizing situation is already a bit kind of sketchy, and the SEC goes after, tokens they deem as securities, or think that there's any nefarious goings on. They've, you know, gone after celebrities who have endorsed tokens, etc. So I think that it would, I think they're going to clutch for it, you know, and then try and give it back to the maybe fine. There might even be a fine, right? They will either go to the end users who lost the coins, or they'll fine the whole lot and be like, party. Now we can sue loads more people and then fund loads more parties, SEC parties.
As long as someone somewhere is having a party. Ben Ark, who gets the money and do they keep it?
Yeah, I think it's going to be complicated. It's going to be. I think Bitfinex will end up with some of it, and then they probably won't give it to the users, and then the users will have to take it to court, and then we'll see where we go.
Future predictions from Ben. Josh Shigala, who gets the money and who keeps it?
Yeah, I'd like to see the people get it, of course. I think they should. It was their funds. They got this bonus BFX token. They should get their Bitcoin back.
And now the correct answer: the company will get the money, but they won't be able to keep it. The users will sue in court, saying that they never signed a contract saying that instead of Bitcoin, they would be given magic beans. And they're right. They never signed that contract. Moving on to issue 2. Craig Wright loses lawsuit against Hodlonaut in Norway over Satoshi Nakamoto claims. Hodlonaut says, "I expected to win, since truth is so clearly on my side in this case. However, the UK case still waves out there." Ben Ark, what do you think about this brief victory for Hodlonaut?
I mean, it helps his case in the UK, and this was kind of why he preemptively took Craig Wright to court against defamation in Norway, which was a good move on his part. It was like good legal counsel. But there will also then be this UK legal battle over whether it was defamation or not. That didn't go so well for Craig Wright with Pete McCormack. So hopefully, you know, with the added clout from the Norwegian courts, it won't go so well for him over the case with Hodlonaut. I out of peer perversion, I couldn't help myself, but I went on CoinGeek and read the write-up on the court proceedings. Obviously, that's Calvin Ayre's awful website where they just produce all this PSV nonsense, and it's quite funny sort of seeing the skip around the fact that the courts in Norway basically said that. I thought it was kind of cool that the judge basically said that, you know, Hodlonaut had a point, so it wasn't defamation because, you know, it was a sort of general sentiment on the internet at that time, but then also, you know, he is a Satoshi. So it's ridiculous, you know, like the courts kind of agreed with him, but then the CoinGeek lot went in their write-up, they were kind of like skipping around that point. But, you know, big congratulations to Hodlonaut. He was, you know, he was defending Bitcoin, and personally must have been very scary because court fees, you know, can be very expensive. He had quite a lot of support, and I know some of the people like Roger Ver support has been supporting these cases against Craig Wright as well, which is thank you, Roger. Come back to Bitcoin one day. Yeah, no, it's not yet over, but it's certainly, you know, a battle won, and then, you know, that chips away at Craig's Wright potentiality to win them all, which of course he won't because he's a ridiculous human being. But yeah, go and read the CoinGeek article. It's quite funny.
Joshua Shigala, Bitcoin Twitter celebrated like the trial was over and like we didn't know this was going to happen. What will Hodlonaut do about the UK case, even though he's won a temporary victory in Norway?
You know, I was really looking forward to seeing this verdict. I think it's about time that Craig's nonsense has been put before a court and actually listened to. Let's see what happens in the UK. I'm not sure. I just sign the keys, dude. If you really are Satoshi, you just sign them. What the hell? Like, that's all you need to do. What? Stop with this scam. It's just insane. Yeah. Just sign the keys.
But he stomped on the hard drives. He stomped on the hard drives, so there's no keys. He stomped on them with his foot, and then there's no keys.
It's just so he's like, I was so angry, I stomped on them with my foot. Yeah, good on you. Okay, nice excuse.
Well, and we all know that if Satoshi came back, he would use the courts to prove his provenance. He wouldn't have like evidence like early drafts of Bitcoin or keys that could prove his provenance. He would go straight to the courts because that's what all of his writing seems to suggest.
I tell you what's interesting is this is a very well-funded stress test on the Bitcoin network, and they're attacking Bitcoin in a load of weird ways where we wouldn't have thought people would try and attack Bitcoin through the courts and things. And it's almost a good thing that there's this very like billionaire, you know, backed idiot who's attacking Bitcoin in all these weird and interesting ways, because we're getting to stress test Bitcoin. And so far, you know, Bitcoin's winning out. But I So one example where they have made some ground is that I was doing a talk, and I googled an image of the Bitcoin white paper, just an image of the Bitcoin white paper, and then on Google I had like all these images of the Bitcoin white paper where it said like Satoshi Nakamoto, aka Craig Wright, where they'd like doctored a picture of the white paper and put aka Craig Wright underneath it. And because so many people have been scared to taking pictures and copies of the Bitcoin white paper off their websites, that attack has kind of worked. Like if you Google the Bitcoin white paper, it pops up on Google Images, and it's quite disorientating if you didn't know what you were, if you don't know the history, if you didn't actually know the Craig Wright, what he is. So yeah, but anyway, they're attacking Bitcoin in all these weird and wonderful, interesting ways, and it is actually probably good for Bitcoin that they're doing that. They're stress testing it.
Well, and that's why it's a good thing we store the Bitcoin transaction data in the blockchain, not in a PDF on the internet. As Ben says, if you get the Google authoritative PDF, suddenly you could be the author of the Bitcoin white paper. If only it was that easy to cash in the money. If only that kind of attack worked for the keys. You could just see Craig Wright out there at home. I'd have all that money. Dan, Eve, what do you think about, are we lucky to have this stress test by this billionaire and his friend, the idiot, allegedly?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say, because it's just, this is just crazy, right? This litigation sort of trail, or continuous litigation keeps on happening. And surely there's, and we said this before, but, and I don't know if there's an answer to this, but surely there's a point where like the courts just stop accepting, like, it's like the point where any company, for example, where that, someone just complains continuously, and there's got to be a point where they have to just ignore that person because they're like, you're obviously just making it up, right? There's so much evidence that shows that he's not Satoshi. There's so much fraud that he's actually done that in courts. There's got to be a point where he's literally in contempt of court in some way for forging documents, and there's legal. He's been caught so many times, but why aren't there any legal repercussions for forging documentation, right? In any normal situation, when you're doing fraudulent activities, by faking something, surely there's a response to it, which is that you yourself should be prosecuted over forging something, and that doesn't seem to happen. As long as you can provide lawyers some money, you can apply to the courts, and maybe he's just going to hop around from country to country. He'll find someone to pick on from Norway to Nicaragua, and just keep on going, and until he's used his toy boy's money, or sugar daddy's money. It's just so funny. Every now and then I'll be reading a tweet about Bitcoin, and then you'll see something from Calvin Ayre who's like, yeah, mate, but BSV's better. And it's just such a nonsensical tweet. And you just kind of almost feel sorry for the guy. He's been railroaded by Craig Wright. Like pretty much everyone who thought they said that they thought that Craig Wright was actually Satoshi has gone back on that. They've reneged and said, oh well, that it wasn't so clear at the time, or he pulled the wool over my eyes, or whatever. There's the famous BBC incident in 2015 where he faked the signature using a variable instead of the actual signature. And it's just, how long is it going to go on for? But this is a big step for Hodlonaut. The sad thing is that in the UK, the libel laws absolutely suck. So Craig Wright's probably got the edge in that regard. And whether they take into account all the evidence that's been brought out in previous cases around the world, and even against Peter McCormack, because in theory, technically, on a technicality, he won the court case, even though he had to, Pete McCormack only had to pay a pound of fees or whatever. So yeah, it's difficult because hands down he should lose the case, right? But English libel laws absolutely suck, so he's got the edge there.
It is an interesting question about how long you're fooled. If Calvin Ayre was only fooled for a month, or if Gavin was only fooled for a month, it would be a different story. The longer that he's fooled, the more money he puts into this, the more sunk cost he establishes, the more that sunk cost fallacy in his head rises up. And he's like, well, I've stuck with my Satoshi and I'm sticking with him. But if you go back to the beginning, when people thought he was Satoshi, it's not a bad idea to get behind a potential Satoshi, right? Like if this had turned out for Calvin Ayre, he would have billions and billions of dollars from the Bitcoin. It clearly hasn't turned out. The only question now is when and if he will cut this guy loose and stop supporting this nonsense, which may never happen.
I mean, the dude's not very bright. You know, this is Gigamex guy. So in that
the obvious follow-up question, Ben, is how does one get so rich if one is not so bright?
you get into the gambling scene. Building gambling software is fun, and there's not enough solutions catered for people. This huge industry worth gazillions, and Calvin Ayre was there very early on. But yeah, he's a fairly deplorable character, I would say.
And also by being a ruthless and shrewd businessman. There's people that like, you know, there's plenty of people I've worked with that they just go to lengths that you wouldn't go to, right? And they're the people that are, you know, extremely determined, and then they make huge amounts of money, but then they do all sorts of crazy stuff. And yeah, Calvin Ayre seems like that sort of guy. And yeah, the stuff that comes out of CoinGeek is just literally insane, right? It's like La La Land. It's getting to the stage where it's, you know, it's flat Earth theory. It's getting to the stage where it's considered as flat Earth theory. If you believe in BSV, if you believe in Craig Wright, he's a Satoshi, for whatever insane reason, you're essentially a flat earther in Bitcoin. You know,
you're like you've as a journalist. I mean, some of the writing's good. You know, like it's not bad writing. It's just the content is absolutely ridiculous. And I always imagine this poor journalist just sat there thinking, how can I spin this now? The boss wants me to spin. And then they're just like, and it's the dregs of the barrel when it comes to journalism, really is.
Let's move on to the exit question. Predict the future. Will Hodlonaut win the UK case? Yes or no? Ben Ark.
Yeah, I mean, I think the courts are probably going to get tired of Craig Wright. They're going to, you know, oh, you again, is it? Okay. All right, here we go again. Someone else you're suing, blah, blah, blah. I think he will, yeah. Yeah, particularly with the Norwegian verdict behind him.
Positivity. Josh Shigala, do you follow up this positive trend?
Yeah, I actually do think he'll win. Yep, Hodlonaut will win in the UK as well.
Dan Eve, somebody come to their senses. Predict the bad ending.
No. I think he's gonna. As much as UK libel laws are awful and stupid and protect people, the wrong people who have money to litigate. I think Hodlonaut's going to win. But just as an aside thing, has anyone read recently about the amount of there's like one Bitcoin miner, BSV miner, who's like just producing empty blocks and trolling BSV continuously. It's pretty brilliant. It's hilarious.
I saw an article when I was looking at the for this article on their terrible website. I saw some article about it and I was like, what's this? What's this empty block BSV thing? Great.
Yeah, it's continuous. Like someone's some miner is just continuously producing empty or very nearly empty blocks. So there's people protesting in ways other than, you know, general support and handshaking, fist waving online about Craig Wright. They're actually producing empty blocks and doing something more constructive to mock the Gigameg network.
I suppose as the only American here, I have to represent the revolution and distrust the British in their old curly white wigs. I think that Hodlonaut will lose the UK defamation trial. The internet will get very upset about this. However, that will change nothing about the UK libel laws, which favor the accuser. Stay tuned. Check out worldcryptonetwork.com. It's got podcasts and 3,011 videos. You could watch World Crypto Network videos for 3 months, 13 days, and 14 hours straight. And if you didn't sleep that long, you'd also go crazy. It's been 8 years and 10 months and 3 days since our first video at worldcryptonetwork.com. Moving on to issue 3. Bitcoin now less volatile than the S&P 500 and the Nasdaq for the first time since 2020. Has Bitcoin decoupled from stocks? Of course, it happens when stocks are going up and now Bitcoin is going down. Ben Ark, tell us about, has Bitcoin decoupled from stocks and it's less volatile than the Nasdaq?
This is interesting because that's where we were at $3,000, wasn't it? And we were at $3,000 for such a long time during the COVID stuff. And yeah, there wasn't much going on. Like I remember, it's like traditionally in Bitcoin bull and bear markets, when you had a bear market, it was just, like tumbleweeds. And I feel like that's where we are now. However, I went to the Amsterdam Bitcoin conference last week, and then I went to Peter McCormack's football club as well, and did like a workshop there. And I have to say, man, like there's so many enthusiastic, very talented, just nice people working on Bitcoin things, and they just weren't there during 2020. So yes, we are in tumbleweed territory where we have this steady price action, but the bedrock is firm, and it gets me very bullish on Bitcoin, thinking that that's where we are. I mean, we're more stable than the Nasdaq as we were in 2020, and we have all this great talent which are working on Bitcoin projects. It's very encouraging indeed, and I just think that when it goes up, it's going to go up pretty hard, pretty fast.
It's interesting when it goes sideways like this, but it's also unnerving and terrifying, because either it goes sideways and everything's fine, you're like, well, this is kind of boring, and either it goes straight down or straight up after that, and you can never really tell.
You've got to remind yourself of 2017, Thomas, where you're at 20 grand. You're like, you're at 20 grand. Oh my God, Bitcoin's so overvalued, it's ridiculous. And now we're like, oh, it's so boring, it's so flat, I'm in a bear market, oh, I'm so depressed.
It is funny. The last time I think we were stuck at 4 grand for a long time, and 20 grand, that's 5 times 4 grand. That's a great deal. Like anybody would take that. Let's go to Josh Shigala. What do you think about Bitcoin? Not so volatile anymore.
Yeah, no, you guys have hit the nail on the head. When it starts to go sideways, or doesn't start to, but is going sideways, for me, that's a sign that it's consolidating now over time. It's stopped consolidating over price, and it's kind of heading towards the end of that boring time. And now what generally happens is a project like ours at the Standard, we've just been building. Projects like Ben's just been building. People are just building in these times, and then they start to release that stuff. And then as stuff gets released, people start getting excited. Oh, that's cool. Oh, that's cool. And then you start getting more VCs excited, and things start moving up again. Saying that, there's also a lot of variables in play here with the general global economic outlay, and what's happening, what's playing out in not only geopolitically with Russia, but also financially across the globe, with countries and people actually really starting to feel the pain. And because they're feeling the pain at the petrol pump, that is a massive sign that food and everything else, because petrol is the underlying price discovery, almost the price leveler, the thing that actually causes food to be at a certain price, because it costs petrol to get there, or gas as you Americans call it. So yeah, I think if you mix that along with money printing, along with more QE, less QE, all of these things play a part. So it's not just Bitcoin, this is what it did last time, so it's going to do it again. I think that definitely should be taken into account as someone that's looking into, using these guesstimates to try to buy or sell, but realize that it's part of a wider thing that's happening in the world, and we're really in strange times at the moment.
Dan Eve, the price of Snapchat went down 25%, but the price of Bitcoin stays the same. How is that possible?
It's really cool, isn't it? The decoupling is like the it's the kind of that pinnacle moment where Bitcoin isn't just going to be trailing the stock market. And maybe there will be a point in the future where Bitcoin is the leader, right? Where things like where they say, oh, the stock market's trailing Bitcoin again, or like it's Bitcoin will be the front runner over fiat. And it's probably going to happen quite soon. Now as much as the price has been very much sideways, whilst we hear all these horror stories of miners that are either going out of business or that are suffering from issues because of the fact that Bitcoin prices dropped, and therefore they've had to lay out all these costs. There was the one where the company had frozen the prices for their users, but they're not frozen the energy prices for themselves. But meanwhile, the hash rates continued. So the core indicator that is the Bitcoin hash rate overall is 264 exahashes as of the last 24 hours, which is within like a couple of percent of all-time high. So that really and the difficulty, I think, pretty much is near as damn it on spot on all-time high at like 35.6 trillion. So in terms of those indicators of how the infrastructure is supporting Bitcoin, those are still continuing to grow despite this sideways motion. And the fact is that anyone that puts a mining business up needs to think of these costs up front. And if they don't, there's always going to be someone who's going to be buying your hardware and running it themselves because they have cheaper electricity. They have some sort of deal where they can actually house the hardware. And so that side of it never really seems to suffer that much. Even when we get the most devastating news of a country banning mining, it drops very briefly, and then soon the mining hash rate reaches another all-time high, thus proving the resilience, the brilliance. Bitcoin's brilliance is resilience, and that's the main thing. Is that whenever you poke a stick at Bitcoin, it fires back and it stands guard and holds its ground, and as the most secure network on the planet. So ultimately, it will be one day Bitcoin leading the rest of the markets and really, truly decoupling from all these other assets and being in a complete class of its own and the leader against fiat.
A future we can all look forward to. And now it's your chance to predict against the original Bitcoin predictor ball. It's bigger, it's balder, and it's better. It's the Bitcoin predictor ball. Dan Eve, will the price of Bitcoin be higher or lower this time next week?
And after all that positive stuff about hash rate, I'm still saying it's going to go a little bit lower because I'm a neggy Nancy. Oh well, we've got a bird's eye view. Yeah, I'm going to go slightly lower again.
Ben Ark, higher or lower?
Man, I mean, like, I remember once, and I was freaking out about Bitcoin. It's when all the split stuff was happening with the Bitcoin Cash stuff, and I had a moment where I was freaking out, and Adam Back popped into a Twitter thread, and he just said, "Look at where the talent is. That's where the value will end up being. Look at Bitcoin. Look at Bitcoin Cash. Blah blah." And there's such talent, and people are building such great things, and honestly, just they're not like like freaky like anon ADHD super coders but drinking too much coffee and freaking out and being all chaotic. These are like legitimate, well-established professionals working in computer science and all these other IT infrastructure, DevOps, who are building great Bitcoin things because they believe in the hardware, they believe in the software, they believe in the project, they believe in the Bitcoin project, and it's interesting to them. And I just can't see how it can fail. And I think the price is going to go up. Look where the talent is, and there's great people building things. Very, very bullish. I'm getting twitchy because of it.
Josh Agala, all this positivity. What do you say?
Yeah, I'm going up. I reckon we're going to slightly go uphill from here on.
All right, and now the ball. Will the price of Bitcoin be higher this time next week? And it says Outlook good. Outlook good. There it is. It's kind of upside down. Let's see. There's a lot of complications here. Outlook good. Oh, well, it changed its way again. So there it is. Positivity from the Bitcoin 8-ball. Hard to believe. Moving on to issue 4. Global recession may last until the 2024 Bitcoin halving, says Elon Musk. At least that's what Cointelegraph says. It actually seems like Elon Musk says the recession may last until May of 2024, which would also be about the same time as the Bitcoin halving. Josh Shigala, what do you think? Is the recession and the halving linked? Is it now up to Bitcoin to lift all boats?
I think they're not linked at all. I think there's, how can it be? The global recession is built by the whims of a bunch of old men behind closed doors deciding what interest rates are at central banks. So I don't think they're linked. I think Bitcoin does its own thing, and people can see patterns where they may. But at the end of the day, the halvening's programmed in. It's always going to be there. I can tell you how many Bitcoin there will be in about 100 years. I can tell you how much there's going to be in 200 years. I can't tell you anything about the fiat system, where that will be at all. So
it doesn't seem very difficult to predict that in the future, the Bitcoin halving will be celebrated by the entire world because it's a creation of value by this regular structure of reducing the number of Bitcoins made every year. It enriches everyone who holds Bitcoin, which eventually will be the whole world. And everyone will be like, yay, number go up day. Dan, Eve, what do you think about the halving? Should we be so positive? Is Elon Musk right? Will Bitcoin save the world?
Well, that's historically when, the kind of, there is a pattern of shortly after the halvening is when things start to pump. But wouldn't it be also cool that at the point when people who may not be necessarily even be in Bitcoin, but start to get excited because their stocks pump at the halvening as well, because Bitcoin's leading the market of the anti-fiat sort of sentiment and saying, right, get out of fiat and put your money into something else. So even though that these stockheads aren't in Bitcoin yet, they're still riding the Bitcoin wave, because when Bitcoin pumps, it ends up bringing all the other markets with it, because there's the hype and the education around how bad keeping your money in fiat is. You might as well take a risk that a stock is going to go up rather than that the government is actually going to control your money. The central banks are going to control your money in such a way that it will increase the value, because that's never been right. That's never been true. I mean, inflation's crazy at the moment. People in charge of monetary policy and fiat money are obviously not doing a great job, because your fiat value is being devalued each year. So you might as well take a punt on Bitcoin. And if you can't do that and you're still stuck in the traditional world, then you'll take a punt on stocks. And yeah, so I ultimately the 4-year cycle is the kind of one of the, you've got all these rainbow method and the stock to flow, which obviously turned out to be not really very accurate and keeps on being adjusted, of course, because it's being fine-tuned, as all good models are that don't really work that much. But the fact is that after a halvening, that's what historically has worked. There has always been a pump after halvening, so it's a fairly logical thing to be thinking that that's going to be when the next big Bitcoin pump happens.
Ben Ark, I don't remember if it was Archimedes or Ayn Rand that said Bitcoin is the engine that runs the world. But is it true now?
Yeah, I think it's a fair prediction that we're sliding into recession. We've got overproduction, lack of demand, instability, war. We've got lots of depressing things which, tend towards recession. We've got the 2008 financial crisis, which is kind of kicked down the road. We've got like poorly, applied Keynesian economics, which is quite dangerous. But I don't think that Bitcoin's a panacea. And I think that Bitcoin's I don't know. It's economics. Just they're not going to make the world. It's not going to make the world a more stable place and keep growth stable. I think that's quite complicated, and in fact, that's why we have central banks, and that's why we have money production, fiscal stimulus, and fair weather surplus recycling to buffer out the peaks and troughs of the capital markets. But yeah, I think we will have a recession, and I think it does make sense that 2024 is quite golden. A few years of recession, and then we'll dig our way out, and we'll all be a little bit poorer. We'll dig our way out of it, and then we'll have growth. And then at that same time, they've got the Bitcoin halvening thing happening as well, so that's kind of timed quite nicely. But yeah, I think it's a fair prediction. But I steer away from this idea that Bitcoin's some panacea. I tell you what it is. It's a free and open source money which can keep fiat currency in check, which is a very good thing. But I don't think Bitcoin itself is a panacea for stability of growth and world economic markets. And I always said World Economics Forum then. You've got to me at last. Damn it. But yeah.
Unfortunately, the mainstream media has interpreted your remarks as Bitcoin is a panacea and it will cure all of your problems.
Fixes everything.
Fixes everything. And of course, everyone with the Google knows that a recession is a significant, widespread, and prolonged downturn in economic activity. A popular rule of thumb is 2 consecutive quarters of decline. But it's getting even worse, Ben, because they're also talking about a possible depression, which is defined as a steep and sustained drop in economic activity featuring high unemployment, which we don't have, and negative GDP growth, which we also don't have.
No. In the UK, we're getting there. Like, our growth was at rock bottom post-Brexit stuff. In fact, when I went to the Amsterdam Bitcoin conference, I had to order some electronics for my workshops, and I ordered them because Martin, he has a place in Amsterdam, and I ordered them to his place, and it reminded me how good Amazon used to be. I could go on there and there was a vast array of LiPo lithium-ion batteries I could choose from. And now in the UK, we have one provider on Amazon of these LiPo batteries, and the polarity is the wrong way around. So you plug them into your microcontroller and they blow up. So it's a dire state of affairs in the UK. We haven't got access to the single market, to the European, the biggest market on the planet, and we're leading the way when it comes to recession and depression. So things might be rosy for you, but take a look at us and our weird little rock.
How are your unemployment numbers? Because I know in the US, as shocking as it may sound, we're near total employment, which as an economist, you're like, let's unemploy some of those people. Let's lighten up the load. Like, nobody likes 100% of anything.
In the UK, we've got a lack of, because we no longer have access to Europeans' labour market, which some people may say is because they will have to increase wages. But like we can't compete with the Europeans for production, even if we devalue our currency, which seems to be happening at the moment. And we just haven't got access to the labour markets we need in order to be able to run a lot of industries. So it's with a recession, it's like compounding factors. The factory can't order the part to continue production. They can't get the labour in to be able to produce. And you have all these compounding factors, and that's what we have in the UK at the moment, which is just slowing growth. And in fact, the UK was the only country, I think, to have no growth in 2021, apart from Russia, which was obviously backwards because of all the sanctions. But yeah, of all the progressed economies, I think the UK performed the worst. Very sad.
Although, according to the FT, the unemployment's the lowest it's been since 1974.
0-hour contracts, my friend.
But regardless, the main thing that we can say is that a lettuce outperforms the British Prime Minister. Yeah, maybe a lettuce would make a good decision.
No one even wants the job of being Prime Minister. Like, they have it, they give up after 6 weeks, and then everyone's like, no, I don't want that job. It's all right, thanks.
Well, not bad. But also, it's a salary of 139k for life after being the Prime Minister for 44 days. So it's a pretty sweet resignation deal, right?
And that's to a lady that is against welfare, right? She's a conservative. Yeah. She certainly never be on the dole for the rest of her life, right?
Yeah, no.
But
Oh,
no,
she
Ben-
earned it in those grueling 44 days of
45
competing
days.
against a lettuce.
Oh, that poor lettuce. But yeah,
It's so
Ben,
bad, Thomas. It's so bad here, Thomas. It's so bad.
that sounds like all the worst parts of Atlas Shrugged. But fortunately, I know there's a fuzzy gentleman waiting in the wings, and he's the same one that brought you Brexit. So it'll be perfect for Boris to clean up the mess. Bring back Boris, is what the media is telling me. They're telling me.
It's definitely
I mean,
getting to the douchebag versus turd sandwich level of the South Park level of politics again, isn't it?
At least you guys get to have so many elections. We only get the one every 4 years. You guys just seem to
Oh, thank God. Could you imagine having to deal with American politics more than once every 4 years? Like, it just takes over. You guys know how to take over the entire global media for like months.
You won't believe it though, Josh. From a television perspective, the choices that you have in America and commercials is either these horrible attack ads that are pretty much untrue on both sides. Like
same in Australia.
Attack. And then on the other side, all we have is horrible prescription drug ads where most of the ad is a description of the side effects. And you hear horrible words like diarrhea and incontinence and all these things, like in the middle of your football game, in the middle of your political show, in the middle of every show you're watching. It's either prescription drugs or politics. And I think really they should just ban them both. But that's
what's crazy is that if you look at the parliament, like live parliament videos and live debate video, especially the UK, like I've seen a few of those, but it's all all the arguments, they're all constructed in the way that you're told not to debate in any other normal way. Like, you avoid ad hominems, or all these kind of argument of authority, all these kind of what they call it. I can't remember the term is, but
like a straw man argument,
straw man, all of those logical fallacies. That's it. Whereas in politics, it's all about logical fallacies. It's not about building a good argument about problems and solutions. It's just about dissing your opponent and getting a laugh, which is an insane way of if that was how it worked in a company. The company would, I don't know, they get sued or something. But in parliament, in politics, it's totally allowed to just be like, oh, you can spend 90 minutes, if you get 2 hours, you get talk time, 90 minutes insulting the other people, and then half an hour of actual stuff that you talk about. And it's just a weird way of going around it.
That's why in Idiocracy, it's a wrestler that is the president. Because at the end of the day, it's just all big WWF style bull dust.
I do quite like some of our institutions in the UK when it comes to politics, though, because we have quite a lot of checks. And then also, if you look at parliamentary debate, it's pretty brutal. Like they're brutal to each. And it's I imagine, like, as maybe as an American looking in and like watching some parliamentary debates, thinking, what the hell is going on in this room? Like
I love it though. I'll stay up late at night watching on PBS or C-SPAN, and they do Prime Minister's questions, and like they're all yelling at each other, and they're always like, "The fine gentleman knows," and then they tear into him. The good sir, Lord, and then they tear into him. It's always the same. I love that. And it's also a good time to remind everyone to check out that old show, Yes, Prime Minister and Yes, Minister. It's truly the greatest British program ever made.
Well, that's what influenced House of Cards, wasn't it? They basically wanted to make that again, but it became House of Cards.
It's so funny because in the old days, it was a comedy and it was all light. And now, as Ben's saying, it becomes House of Cards with the violence and the murder and the true power. But it's all about bureaucracy and just how ridiculous the government is. And it's all just kind of clever turn of phrase. Check out Yes, Prime Minister. Also, I've been rewatching part of The Boys on Amazon. And it seems like at first it's just this big superhero thing. And it's kind of superheroes gone bad, especially the core idea of what if Superman was bad? But as you continue to watch around season 2, it starts to turn a little political. Season 3, it's very political. And I definitely think people should check out The Boys if you haven't already. For what we're looking for here is kind of that breakdown of civility to where it's just power for power's sake. And if someone's more powerful than you, they can do anything they want to you because power justifies it. And we see the results of that in this television show. But let's move on to the exit question. Speaking of Elon Musk, is this Twitter thing still happening? Do we still think it's a good thing? There's still a chance to change your mind. Dan, Eve, what about Elon Musk and the Twitter really quick?
Yes, I think it's still happening. But I did see that he said, or he supposedly or allegedly said, whatever the word is for that, got to prefix it, that he's going to get rid of 75% of the staff, which could, in a way, it could mean that it's moving. That's more of a move to the open source and the community sort of managing it rather than, which, you know, laying people off is always bad. But yeah, it seems like it's going to go ahead. Otherwise, he's fucked, basically.
That reminds me of what Shakespeare said. He said, if you want to create tyranny, first thing you do is you get rid of all the lawyers. And in the same way, I think if Elon wanted to create chaos in this company and maybe destroy it and maybe just create some kind of a new, bizarre, more like a Lovecraftian Twitter, kind of a Cthulhu type Twitter, I think firing 75% of the people would be a good start towards something like that. Let's go to Josh Shigala. What do you think about Elon Musk? Is it still happening? Is it still a good thing? I know you're more positive on this than I am, probably, but
yeah, I think it's a great thing. I mean, Twitter's just a shithole. It really is a terrible platform. It could, with a lot of great potential. There's a lot of absolute toxic nonsense. It's so nonsensical in terms of its community guidelines. You just go on there. There's countless, like, just you get like eye raped with some awful porn all of a sudden on your feed for no reason, and you're like, what the heck? Like, yet that's somehow allowed. Yet, you know, saying something that might be of interest in terms of, you know, an alternative health perspective, not banned, blocked. If you know, like more conservative values, you're out. I just find it's just a shithole, really. And I'm only using it because of crypto Twitter, but generally I think it, you know, apart from all that, apart from its weird way of censoring people that doesn't really make much sense, the other thing is, where's the technological advancement? Like, every time I open up Telegram, there's an update where it's like, now we've got this, now we've got that, now we've, you know, got the ability to do this and that. The only thing Twitter's done is added Twitter Spaces really badly, might I add, where it's only available on the phone and you can't actually tweet live while you're in there. Like, you can't have a conversation. You can't, like, in terms of a text conversation within there. There's just so much stuff. You can't edit a post yet and have the history of the edits, all of this stuff. What do all these people do there? What do they all do at Twitter? I say, Elon, scrap them all, get a new bunch of people in, get some proper engineers that actually innovate, open the API back up so people can actually build on top of the platform. But most of all, make it open source. Open source it, check out Nostr, and yeah, make it open source, mate.
Well, the best part of this Twitter experiment is that we get to see what happens. Ben, Ark, what do you think about Elon Musk and Twitter?
The Blue Sky lot, they started following a bunch of Nostr projects, and Nostr, for those who don't know, Jack Dorsey years ago was like, I'm going to make an open source Twitter, but then obviously that's antithetical to for profit motives that you would have with a company if you own proprietary software. So the Blue Sky, he basically employed like a bunch of pretty clever people actually to try and build something like a decentralized version of Twitter. And they didn't do much. I think they just went to like Silicon Valley, Austin parties and told everybody, you know, over beers that they were going to make the new decentralized Twitter, and didn't do anything. But then in the background, then there's this great Nostr protocol, which is fantastic. And like when the problem is with Twitter is, you know, it's a proprietary company and you're giving them your data. So you shouldn't really be shocked when they do things which they're incentivized to do, such as keeping their government happy by only, you know, allowing certain flavors of content on their platform. And then it goes back to that thing, not your keys, not your keys, not your Bitcoin. It's the same with, so Nostar it's just raw public key crypto. You have public key, private key, sign messages with a private key, and then people can subscribe to the public key. The Twitter implementation, which is, I started Twitter implementation, but FearChaps forked it now. It's called Branel. It's very good. It's very sophisticated, and now they have like handles as opposed to like actually just following a public key. But it's kind of nice to see public key crypto in the raw, because it solves a lot of the world's problems. And that's what I hope Elon does. I think originally, like he said, he was going to try and open source a lot of it, and that is the answer. Just a way of like skirting around the censorship issue, because if you're a private company and you're in control of all this data, then you have to censor it, or else you're going to get in trouble with the local government or whatever. But if it's open source and it's done in such a way where they don't have that control, then it can be a little bit more free as a platform. But I think Twitter is kind of great in a way, because look at Facebook and how much it's changed over the years, and I think that Jack Dorsey kind of now Twitter got locked down pretty early on as a platform, which the world seemed to have needed because people use the thing and we all use it. So, but yeah, if that can be sort of decentralized and made free and open source, then I'm all up for that. And if it's Nostar, then absolutely.
It is still surprisingly simple at its core. It's that message box, and then you post it, and that's about it. Definitely check out Nostr and LN Bits. If you're a coder or if you want to work on it, there's lots of projects out there you can get involved. Dan, did you have more on this? No, you
caught me mid-yawn.
I know.
Proper goal is
Josh.
proper
they're
goal.
counting them in the chat. Yeah, they probably
grab
got
onto him from now on. He's the yawner now.
I was signaling. But the only thing is with Ben mentioned about the open source making it more able to evade state restrictions around content, is that a lot of the times when people have been deplatformed, they haven't broken any laws. They've not actually broken any laws. They've just literally been deplatformed. So I don't think there's a state requirement that they're able to evade by the censorship is largely down to their own choices and whatever is twisting their arm ultimately. So yeah, I think open source would make it definitely more state resilient and have less prying hands. But I don't think that's been a driver in a lot of the censorship that we've seen today.
I think it's corruption resistance, isn't it? So like, okay, maybe it's not state, maybe it's the CEO and their political affiliations, whatever, but it can't be corrupted from forces within and without, from outside forces as well. And I suppose that should be the goal in a something which we all use as kind of a commons. Like perhaps that's how it should operate.
Well, that's it. It makes an equilibrium of the users rather than whoever is in control of it. Which is like Bitcoin, right? Because ultimately, whoever, you have your chance to vote. And so the voters have the power rather than external people who don't, who just say, we want you to change the platform in this specific way.
We're running out of time. Moving on to bonus issue 5. Coinbase and industry leaders file amicus brief in support of the Grayscale spot Bitcoin ETF. As we all know from Law and Order, amicus brief means friend of the court, and Coinbase is a friend of the court. They say that the SEC has categorically denied every proposal for spot Bitcoin ETFs in the US, while at the same time putting their thumb on the scale and allowing similar, riskier products such as Bitcoin futures ETFs to enter the market. Dan, Eve, what do you think about Coinbase supporting this proposal and the SEC for continuously not allowing Bitcoin ETFs at spot while allowing them as futures?
Well, if one of the main arguments used to be about the worry about volatility about Bitcoin, we've now got this latest article that is less volatile than the S&P and the Nasdaq. And the other argument about it being externally interfered with by market manipulation. Well, you know, one of the biggest finds in history was well, in the UK it was LIBOR rates. That there's plenty about JP Morgan and the gold, and it was the sort of silver manipulation. So I think those arguments just don't stand any, you know, the stilts are weakening on those arguments. Essentially, there's plenty of other markets where this thing has been happening all along, and yet those companies aren't just still around, but they're thriving. Right, they're extremely successful given all the other market conditions. So to say that Bitcoin specifically, which is the most resilient and the most defiant amongst all external actors, to say that can't be, you know, converted, and you've already got a futures market, so why not make it spot? Why not be allowed? The only thing I can think of, which is never talked about, is actually that the risk, I think, that lies with Grayscale owning the Bitcoin on behalf of the users. The only risk I see, external market factors, forget about those, is getting hacked, is the private keys being compromised in some way, even if it's a multi-sig compromised in some way, and the Bitcoin making its way to other people and then not being able to recover it. That's the only thing that I can see, and that's never actually brought up in the arguments. Apart from that, all the other arguments fall down compared to the industries that we have nowadays, and these huge companies that have been fined yet are still around and still funded by the government, even more so than ever. And not just that, but when they do fail, they're funded by the government not to fail because they're in too big of a position to fail. And so, yeah, Bitcoin isn't any of that. And yet it's still being held back by these reasons, which are really quite unjust.
Josh Agala, why won't the SEC allow a spot ETF? And we know that we're all thinking it rhymes with conspiracy, right?
Yeah, it's basically because the crypto space removes a whole lot of inefficiencies from the legacy market. The SEC regulates the legacy market. Once people start figuring out how much better the crypto space is, Web3, DeFi, Bitcoin, all of this has massive advantages, and it only serves to start sucking in vast amounts of liquidity into the space. And I think the SEC's hell-bent on stopping that as much as they can. Like, this is why they were so angry at Coinbase for daring to offer like 3% interest on their Bitcoin holdings or something like that, because you know, basically Coinbase was putting that in AMMs, like automated market makers. But the SEC was like, this must be a scam. How are you doing this? Oh no, because there's not 1,000 middlemen taking a cut before it reaches a market maker. We're allowing people to directly market make. So, but the SEC is such a boring association of regulator. It's just so corrupt. I'm just going to go there and say it. I just think it's okay. Let's not say corrupt, but I think it works in the interests of the legacy system, and not really in the way that it should.
Well, and Josh, we've been talking about this issue, it seems like almost 10 years now. What should we say to someone who joined Bitcoin yesterday, like Mr. Wonderful from Shark Tank, who says we need regulation, and that like Bitcoin hasn't been open to regulation? As Dan said, we're not even volatile anymore. As long as they can handle the private keys, it should all be fine, right? Why can't we get this regulation? I mean, this is they just said it's easy, like, oh, just regulate it like it's a new product. Like they had the gold ETF and they had the diamond ETF. Why can't we get this ETF?
Well, it's funny because there's this idea of regulation, but what does that even mean? No one even knows what that means. And then I've been to conferences where people ask the question to the audience, should Bitcoin be more regulated? And everyone holds up their hand, and it's like, hang on a minute. The biggest bank in the world just got fined billions of dollars for like money laundering for some cartels. and they're regulated till hell breaks loose. Like they're so overly regulated. It made no difference. And the word regulation is kind of like it's just sort of this blanket statement, like the word vaccine. It just sort of means something that everyone goes, oh, that's what it means. Okay, it's all good. But actually, you need to look in what sort of regulation do you want? What sort of regulation? What does that even mean? That's what I want to know.
Well, I really thought Leo Wald was going to bring us this ETF with the Valkyrie company, and they had the Bitcoin and all that stuff. But from what I hear now, they're working on a Tron ETF instead. So, oh well, so much for that.
Well, a Tron ETF. Tron.
Why not?
ETF.
If we get told down for one, why not ask for something even bigger?
That's great.
Well, we were going to ask Ben, but it looks like Ben has dropped off. So we're going to head towards the end of the show. Dan, Eve, prediction or story of the week. Go ahead.
Oh, shit.
He's like frozen in the start, in the spotlights. Oh, God, come on. Just say the price is going up. That's what everyone wants to hear. You have triangles. You have charts.
My prediction, okay, based on the stories, okay, my prediction. Okay, I predict that Bitcoin, I think Grayscale and Co, I think they're going to be successful this time. I like this idea of the ability to bring in external experts in this Amicus thing. That sounds like a constructive way of dealing with it, right? If you've got the SEC or whoever it is that's rejecting this ETF, slapping down their own analysis, but then you've got industry experts that are saying, here are the reasons why you should actually approve this ETF. I think that's going to be constructive, and I haven't heard that in any of the previous arguments before. I'm sure it probably could have happened, but it's not been brought up. So maybe this is a pivotal moment where there are industry experts, not just crypto-focused ones, that are saying that there's no reason not to have a Bitcoin ETF now.
How close?
I think positive.
6 months, a year,
3 months.
3 months. All right, 3 months. We've got it. Put it on the calendar. Joshua Shigala, prediction or story of the week. Go ahead.
I still don't understand really. Like maybe someone in the notes can help me understand. But what really is the major difference between MicroStrategies and an ETF? I mean, you're effectively buying Bitcoin when you buy MicroStrategies. They don't do anything else. They have Bitcoin on their balance sheet. That's their business. Has been for a while.
So, I mean, it seems like the only problem is like MicroStrategies. At any point, they could say we're quitting Bitcoin and we're collecting Beanie Babies. Right. Nobody saw this coming. We're ahead of the market. We're thinking outside the box. Whereas I would think the ETF would be just a little tighter on what it can buy and not buy. I think it's a lot like, because for whatever reason, the diamond ETF can't buy gold, right? And the gold ETF can't buy diamonds, even though everyone thinks they're both great, right? I'd hope that your Bitcoin ETF would stay out of the Beanie Babies market.
Yeah, come on, get out of there, sailor. But story of the week is that we finally launched our referral program. If you want to go on the wait list, we're very, very close to launching the standard, which will be the standard in stablecoins, decentralized stablecoins. So it's been a year in the making. We launched the referral program, giving away $1.45 million worth of TST, as well as in airdrops and things to people referring, and then people doing different tasks. Also, check out the D work now. We've really opened up the DAO so people can come and help out. If you're a writer, if you're a graphic designer, if you're a coder, if you're whatever you're into, you can come help the DAO out, and it'll be really great to have you on board. So check out thestandard.io and sign up to the waitlist there, and invite your friends and get a cut of the pie.
That sounds great. And thanks to Ben for joining us. I know Ben's going to be going to the Edinburgh Bitcoin conference, or whatever they're calling it these days, tomorrow. So if you're there, check him out in Scotland. Of course, Ben and Martine both went to the Amsterdam Bitcoin conference. Very cool. Shout out to Martine and General Bytes and their new accounting software, Whale Books. I think they did very well at the convention. I saw a lot of great pictures of Martine and Carell and the whole General Bytes team there. So shout out to them and everybody that's still traveling around doing conferences. Thanks so much to everybody for watching the show. Be sure to give us a thumbs up and subscribe down below. Until next time, bye.